Hey there, how you doing? I'm TechDweeb, welcome. Thanks for clicking on the video today. A while back I reviewed the One X X1, not to be confused with the X1 One X or the XX11 or the X1X X11 XXX. I don't know why people keep getting them mixed up. They couldn't be more different, honestly. The One X X1 was a freaking chonker of a handheld. It had an 11-inch screen and it was glorious to game on. It used the 8840U APU, which is much more performant than the ROG Ally X or the Lenovo Legion Go. I enjoyed my time with it, but I found I didn't grab it that often just because it was so big that it didn't fit my style. And that's where this comes in. The One X X1 Mini that we get to check out today thanks to Whatgeek. They sent this to me to show to you guys, so thanks for that, Whatgeek. There's a link in the doodad below. Yeah, you get a mountain of boxes with this thing. It looks like the first box has the middle part to the controller. This is like a battery pack and a transmitter if you want to use the controller as an actual controller. And in here we get the controllers, and you can snap those into the middle part. And there you go, it's a controller. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. And in here we're gonna get the keyboard, I think. Oh my gosh, that is so freaking beautiful and adorable. And on to the main event. It looks like I have a version with 32 gigabytes of RAM and 2 terabytes of storage. That's nuts. All right, let's get this open here. There's the doodad itself, and we'll come back to that. Down here we have another box. What? No word paper. It's in the lid. Yeah, standard word paper stuff. How to turn it on. Who the hell cares? So yeah, this is a 100 watt GAN charger, and it's just a USB-C charger with a nice braided USB-C cable. I wish more companies did chargers like this. And onto the gizmo itself. There it is. So it's kind of like a chunky tablet. It's got a kickstand on the back. Stand it up on your table. Oh yeah, there we go. Look at that. It's like a little laptop. Tiny little chunky boy laptop. Get this fired up. Yeah, this is a much more manageable size as sort of a hybrid handheld than the original X1. And obviously it needs to be all set up and have the games installed and stuff, but I'm not going to show you that because now we need to talk about the specs. The X1 Mini is powered by the Ryzen 8840U processor with integrated Radeon 780M graphics. We get 32 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM clocked at 7500 megathings per second. My version comes with 2 terabytes of storage, and the storage can be upgraded. The screen is a 8.8-inch screen, 144 Hz refresh rate with a resolution of 2560 by 1600. And we also get a bunch of other good stuff like Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.2, a massive 65 watt-hour battery, and it comes with Windows 11 Home installed out of the box. And here's the full specs if you want to see those. Up top, we have a power button, volume up and down, a quick settings button, a USB-C hole for charging, and a USB-A hole, which you know I love to see, and a headphone hole. Underneath, we have our dual stereo speakers, a magnetic connection for the keyboard, a USB-C hole, an Oculink hole, and an SD card hole. Around back, we have a kickstand in the middle and another vent grill. The controller has a middle part here with a USB-C hole for charging and a power button and a sync button. And we have a D-pad over here, dual thumbsticks in the Xbox configuration, face buttons, start and select, and 2 function buttons for device hotkeys. Up top, we have bumpers and triggers. Around back, we have 2 programmable paddle buttons and switches to detach the controllers. The keyboard is a little guy with arrow keys down here, number keys up here, which can also be function keys, and a bunch of other alternate functions for a bunch of the other stuff. And a cute little trackpad with separate left and right click, and also touch click and gesture support. There are 3 main kind of modes. There's handheld mode, tablet mode, and laptop mode. Let's start with laptop mode because that's straightforward. You know, you can attach the keyboard to the bottom and it becomes like a laptop. You can type with the keyboard, use the trackpad, even game on this if that's your thing. I'm not going to say that it's comfortable to use, but it works, you know? It's usable as a keyboard. And the trackpad works fine. It's just kind of a mini laptop, really. And then tablet mode is like where you set the thing down and play with the controller. Obviously, you can plug this into your TV and use it like a home console. And if you have an eGPU, then you can plug that in and upgrade the performance to something closer to a real console. And handheld mode is where you attach the controllers to the device and turn it into a handheld. They just slide in on the side and they snap into place. They're quite firm, there's no wiggle to them, and they work great like this. The big boy X1 felt like a giant weird thing when you're holding it, but the X1 Mini feels a lot more like just a big handheld, like the Legion Go. I much prefer the X1 to the Legion Go because I hated the controls on the Go. This feels more like a traditional controller. I like it better. You also have access to some shortcuts like this. You can tap this little button here to bring up a keyboard, and if you hold select and press X, you'll bring up the quick settings. And you can also bring those up by pressing this turbo button up on the top. Oh, and the controller can swap the D-pad on the controller. Either go with the standard style D-pad or the flat rolling style, which is what I prefer. The controls are okay. The D-pad is clicky and it works well, good quality inputs, no false diagonals or whatever. The buttons are membrane and they feel a little mushy, but they're alright. Same thing with the bumpers. The sticks and triggers are Hall sensor and they're really high quality inputs. Obviously, this is a high-end device and the controls are geared towards like high-end PC games. I don't think this is an ideal device for retro games because of the clicky D-pad and the kind of mushy buttons. It doesn't feel like a retro game controller. It feels more modern, if that makes sense. Yes, it does. I love playing any games on this thing specifically because the screen is so great. It's bright and colorful. It's a 144Hz screen, which means that everything feels super smooth. Obviously, you'll have to make sacrifices in games to get the FPS up, but when you do, oh man, they feel great. And even just like using Windows or whatever, the smoothness can be felt no matter what you're doing on this thing. Also, crazy high resolution. 2560 by 1600, and the games that can run at that resolution look really sharp, and you get a ton of options when it comes to resolution scale or pixel scaling in retro games. The speakers are downward firing and they're a little bit muffled, but they are loud and not terrible. I don't mind them, but there's definitely room to improve there. One X has their own software for controlling the device settings. You can bring that up with select an X or tap this button up top. And in here you can control the TDP. You can go anywhere from 4 watts up to 30 watts, change the fan profile, and toggle some quick settings like the resolution, change the RGB on the sticks, toggle the performance overlay, enable gyro, and change the brightness and the volume. And you can tap this button down here to open the full software, where you can add games like a front end, download updates and launchers, and most importantly, access the controller settings, where you can change key bindings and adjust the sensitivity curves on the sticks and the triggers. It all works fine. I've had no issues pulling this stuff up and using it in-game or whenever I need it. Well done, One X. Your software doesn't suck.
Yeah.
I wanted to give you an idea of what you can expect by way of performance and battery, so I ran some benchmarks on Shadow of the Tomb Raider. These tests were running at medium settings, 1600p with 50% resolution scale and the screen brightness set to 50%. At 30 watts, I was getting 57 FPS on average, and the battery indicator suggested that I'd get about 1.5 hours of game time like this. Then I went down to 20 watts and I was getting 52 FPS on average, and we get about 1.8 hours of game time like this. At 15 watts, I was getting 45 FPS on average, which is still a fine FPS and maybe worth the trade-off because we get around 2.3 hours of game time. And down at 10 watts, I was getting just 28 FPS on average. So that's a huge downgrade, even if it means now we'll get like 2.7 hours of game time. And then at 4 watts, no. Just 16 FPS on average. And even though you get 3.5 hours of game time, it's not worth it. In demanding games at least. I'd personally be playing higher end games like this between 15 and 20 watts, and I'd be lowering the settings to get that FPS up. On this chip, you can quickly get into diminishing returns territory when you go up past 20 watts, so it's really not worth doing unless you need to. Most games will be good in the 15 to 20 watt sweet spot, and you won't be playing demanding games down at lower wattages, but indie games usually run well at lower wattage. Some easy games can be run at 4 watts, but some might need to go up to 6 or 7 watts, and you'll get a lot of battery life like that, over 3 hours of battery. This is nowhere near the Steam Deck or even the ROG Ally in terms of battery life. However, the 8840U is much more performant, and your games will run better here, even though you won't get as much battery life. And you can run the games at the same settings and FPS but lower wattages to kind of even it out. For the rest of these tests, I'll be running at 30 watts. Not because that's what I personally do or recommend, but to show you a best case scenario. Starting off with Black Myth Wukong, 1600p, 50% FSR, frame gen off, and medium settings. I was able to get 52 FPS on average like this. I've been really loving this game. I totally suck at it, but it's one of those games that I don't mind sucking at because it's fun to get better. I also love the vibe of it. I love hanging out in this beautiful forest and the chill zen shrines and stuff. I'm excited to get further into this one. And speaking of wanting to get further, here's Elden Ring. I'm still stuck at this boss duo. This fight started great. I got through the warrior without too much trouble, so I was pretty sure this would be the time that I came out on top, but no. Things went really bad really quickly. Ah well. I'm running this at 1080p, high settings. This game has a 60 FPS cap, and I was at that most of the time, but it would dip down to the high 50s when the screen was full of effects and stuff. And next up is good old Witcher 3. This is 1600p with performance FSR and a mix of settings, mostly medium settings. I was getting around 82 FPS on average. This game I'm actually fine running at like 40 FPS. So I'd personally be playing this down at like 15 watts or so I can get the most battery life possible. That'd be around 2.5 hours of game time, which is really solid considering how good this game looks at these settings. And here we have
God of War.
This is 1600p with low medium settings mix, ultra performance FSR, which still looks really sharp because we're working from a 1600p base resolution and the screen is big, but it's not like computer monitor big. So it's generally worth the sacrifice. I got about 60 FPS on average here. And real quick, I wanted to show you a couple other use cases. Obviously, retro games are going to be amazing on here. I like to play with shaders on to scratch that nostalgia itch, and they look great on high-res screens like this. And because these games are so easy to run, you can lower the TDP right down and get a good few hours of game time. I also wanted to show you laptop mode with some Crusader Kings 3. This game doesn't play well with controllers, but I could play it here in laptop mode. I'm not going to say that using this tiny keyboard and trackpad is the best way to play. Adding a mouse at least would be better, but I played for quite a while and I had a great time, so yeah, you'd be good to go like this for lots of cursor-centric games, I think. And indie games, of course, they look freaking glorious on this big beautiful screen. These games are super easy to run, and generally I was running them at around 5 watt TDP. I was able to finally beat this tough level in Bot Vice that had been kicking my butt for ages. I felt pretty good about that. And I was playing a few new games that I've been enjoying. Here's the new G.I. Joe Wrath of Cobra, which is a beat-em-up game sort of in the style of Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. It seemed really fun from what I played so far. And this is Iron Meat. It's freaking bonkers, and it really does feel like Contra, right down to the controls and the power-ups. A super fun game. And this one is called Tower of Dreams. This was made by a dweeb who hangs out in my Discord server. He gave us a sneak peek there as he worked on it, and it's finally come out on Steam. It's got adorable pixel art with this dreamy retro wave color scheme and super simple character and background tiles. It's kind of a mixture of Celeste and Shovel Knight. You gotta run through the levels, collecting the gems, jumping off walls, and you get a sword that lets you bounce off the ground and enemies. It's honestly super addictive and fun as heck. I'll include a link to this in the doodad below. You should definitely check it out if you like what you see. Ultimately, this thing isn't going to be for everyone. It's not nearly as big as the X1, but it's still really big. But if you are into bigger screen devices, then you don't have many options. This thing is like a beefed up Legion Go, and I prefer it to the Legion Go in many ways. This thing is not cheap though. You get a lot here, but you pay a lot to get it. 32 gigabytes of RAM and 2 terabytes of storage is never going to be cheap. But considering the number of people I see buying Steam Decks and ROG Allies and then buying a multiple $100 storage upgrade, I can see the appeal here. You get a no compromises device. No need to upgrade or anything. You get all the versatility and connectability and expandability that you could ever need. If you're willing to splurge, you'll have an amazing time with this thing, even if you have to sell your POG collection to afford it. And if you want to get one, definitely check out Whatgeek. They have this for sale, along with the 1X GPU and a ton of other Windows handhelds and GPUs and even retro handhelds and stuff. There's a link in the doodad below. And that brings us to the end. I hope you enjoyed checking out the X1 Mini. I'm sorry about my voice in this video. I've been sick for the last couple days, and it's finally felt like I could record again, even if it sounded a little bit weird. If you made it this far into the video, you should probably subscribe if you haven't yet. Click the like button if you liked the video, or don't if you didn't. That's it from me for today. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.